But with that, once again, I'd like to thank Randi for presenting these detailed examples of the IEDB database. Hopefully, with Alex's presentation, Randi's together, you get a really great understanding, and then Alba towards the end will reinforce that again. So hopefully by the end of day one, you'll have a really solid understanding of the database. But now, very happy to introduce Kelly Wheeler, our Leidos Senior Software Engineer. So Leidos is one of our subcontractors that basically maintains the whole IEDB database. And Kelly will be presenting a new database feature that we've launched this year, the customized data exports. Thanks very much, Kelly. Take it away.
Thank you, Nina. Yeah, as she said, I'm going to go over one of the new features that we released this year. And if you've actually attended our seminars in the past, then you'll know that this has been worked on for a little while now, because I've talked about it in its development stages, but it's now currently live. It's our customized data exports, how you can get the data out of your queries from the IEDB into multiple formats for you to use in your research or for your analysis. So I'll start out by what we currently, or what used to have, which was this, where you click on the export results, which Randi spoke about briefly in her presentation. It used to pop up a box where you could only export to a CSV file or a CSV file with IRIs, which are identifiers for the different pieces of data. Then it would immediately download that aspect or that export for your query, and you would then have that to consume. The problem with that was it came in one format, which was CSV, which is comma separated values, which is pretty standard, but it's also a little restricting from the standpoint of what you can consume it and how it displays in certain applications such as Excel or Google Documents or something like that. It also limited by the fields that you got was only this pre-canned selection of fields that we determined to have the export have, which I'll go into a little bit further in a few minutes. So why we decided to make this change was, first off, this was one of the biggest changes, one of the biggest feature requests that we had amongst all of our users, is the ability to only export what you want and not have everything out there, or conversely, have more options to export that we didn't have before, because we had to limit the fields that it exported from the database just because of size constraints or complexity constraints. So it was limited to the CSV format, which I spoke about a little bit ago. It had this fixed set of fields that we only had determined. It only had the dual headers, which I can show you here. You can see that there's two sets of headers here, one to describe a section and one to describe the actual field itself. You had no explanation to what each of these fields meant. So you'd have to go into the help documents, other places on the website, to try to understand exactly what each of these fields stood for in context to what it's displaying. You had no information about what your query was ran after the fact. So if you ran, 5 queries that day, you would have to keep track of yourself which exports that you did had the particular data that you wanted for that set of query parameters. It also had a lack of information, again, when. So if you were to download, the data, since our database updates weekly, if you were to download the data every week or every month for a set period of time, you would have to keep track of, okay, this was exported on this date with this subset of data. Where does that fit into my timetable? So with that in mind, we decided to develop this new customized data export feature, which greatly expands the usability of the exports to include a lot of those shortcomings that the previous versions had. It gives much more information on each field. It allows complete customization for the user to get exactly which data you want out of the database, not just what we've determined is subset of the data that we think is important, or not necessarily important, but what we think is relevant. And it provides a lot of information linking the data to your query. So for archival purposes or for reference when you come back to it, you can keep track of what everything that you were thinking and working with at that particular time. So here's an example of the new exports. Same interface. You still click on the export results link up here that Randy showed. But now, instead of popping up that little window that only has the two options, you now have this export to file pop up, which gives you complete control over everything that you're about to do your export on. So I'm going to go a little bit more into this window to try to explain what all the options are and what they do and how they all work. First off, you have the file format drop down, which lets you now choose, instead of just CSV, which is still option here, we also have this XLSX, which is the native Excel format, which can open up in any Microsoft Excel application with all the bells and whistles that come with that already informed and included, instead of having to download it as a CSV, then open it in Excel, hope that Excel renders it correctly, and then do all your manipulation from there. This also expands to allow for additional sheets if you need to or want to, and any of the other things that come with using Excel. So yeah, I forgot that I had this. So this is an example of how the Excel format looks like, which is very similar to how it would look if you were to open the CSV, but not exactly, because Excel has some little quirks when it comes to opening CSV files, where it likes to translate some fields that aren't necessarily the data format that it thinks. It likes to do it with currency and with dates in particular. So this should alleviate a lot of those issues if you want to deal with all your data in Excel, to be able to do your filtering or sorting or whatever you need to. This helps out a lot in that standpoint. It's also the most user friendly because of those features. The CSV format is the comma separated values, which is programmer friendly. It's what previously we were using, where you can see it's just a comma separated list of all your data from your exports that you saw in those tabs that Randy showed, including all of them that aren't shown, because the tabs show by default 25 records, and if you have 2,000, these exports will export all 2,000 records that you had, not just what was shown on the screen. We also have the option for the TSV, which is the same thing as CSV, except using tabs instead of commas. Again, this is mostly for using if you want to pipe this into a different application, or if you have a custom application that you've written and you want to import our data to utilize. This is also another format that we can use. You can use tabs instead of commas. And the final file format we have is this JSON file, which is a programming format that's used widely across the web. It's the JavaScript object notation. You can see an example here where this one is really highly specialized towards if you want to import it into another application to consume, say you have a Python script or something else. This is one of the easiest ways to get the data in and then manipulate it within your application. After that, the next option we have in this drop down, which is universal through all the tabs, by the way, is the header row format, which I briefly talked about before, because we had in the previous one, you were limited to only having these double headers, which has a section and then a field name. So the field name directly relates to the section. So you can take it as, this is the epitope's object type, for example, in this example here, and then it goes into your data. The next option you can have is just a single header, which combines them into one, which is useful for importing into applications that expect a header row, but sometimes having those double header rows can confuse things because it expects one header row, is kind of the standard format. So this is a way to get around that, so you can still have the header row, so you can still humanly read it, but still import it into something if it expects only one header row. The final option is no headers, which is just all the data, which is the most useful for if you're importing it or passing it along somewhere. But then you get no information about what each of the rows correlate to. But if you're selecting that one, I would assume that you would know what you're doing to use the data for. So that would be what that option is there for. The next field we have down is this export type, which is just a kind of a shortcut to let you select a subset of the data that we've thought would be relevant for what would be the standard usage, so to speak, for a user. The options that we have for this, which is again universal for every tab, but could change in the future if we determine this tab in particular needs a specialized export type that fits some niche use, so to speak. The options that you have is the full, which is by default what pops up, which is all of the data columns. Get quite large, especially for some of those assay exports that we have. The next one is what we call default, which is a pre-selected default set of columns selected by the IEDB team that we've considered maybe the most relevant for ours, or the most widely used, or the most widely requested columns. The next option is the default, including the IRI columns, which is the same thing as the default, but includes any identifiers that are associated with those particular default fields. So for example, if you have the source antigen, you can have the IRI, which is the identifier associated with that source antigen, in the export as well. Some people really like the IRIs in there. Some people really don't. It's mostly for use if you want those identifiers to have a unique identifier for those columns. The next one, which is another thing that we didn't have before, which is really requested, was the IEDB website displayed option, which is the set of columns that is exactly shown on those tabs. So when you go and you're in your export and you see the tab that has, what Alex showed earlier, it has the counts of the references associated with that epitope. That data was never accessible for export previously because we had those subsets of fields. Now this one's a special export because it can't be modified just because it is just what's shown on that tab. It is a straight export of all the records in that format. And then finally, we have the custom export, which is what gets selected if you make any modifications or anything to the fields, which I'll show a little bit later in my slides to show a better example of how that all works. So again, here's because IEDB website displayed is a special one, I want to show it a little bit more for epitope, for example. You can see that it has the ID, the epitope, the antigen, the organism, the reference count, and the assay counts for this one. It is, again, directly what you see on the website, and it unfortunately cannot be modified just because of the fact that it's got some specialized fields that are not really used anywhere else, not necessarily not used anywhere else, but not shown in that format anywhere else. In particular, these counts fields are quite intensive if we try to link them with other things. So it it is not able to be modified, which is signified by this grayed out here, but it'll still export. So now the meat and potatoes, so to speak, of this custom export feature is the ability to completely customize your field sets of what you want from the IEDB, your IEDB query. It allows you to expand all of these sections that you can see over here to see all the subfields, like these are the subjects, or these are the in the header rows, these are equivalent to the sections, and then these are the field names. You can go in and modify anything that you want to export or don't want to export. So in this example here, if you didn't want modifications, you unclick that and it goes away and it won't export that field, but it'll export everything else. If you want to, you can select complete sections to exclude or include. So say you didn't want the IEDB ID field or the IEDB section at all, you would click the section box here and it would deselect it, and then that whole section would be unincluded. If you see here, you can see that I've selected a couple different fields and then unselected other ones and so forth. So you can see that this section is partially included, so that's why it's a half green box instead of a full green box, which indicates that that entire section is selected, or if it or a empty box indicates that that section or field is not included at all. So here's a quick example of some of all the different for the different tabs that we have that can all be exported. Each one is going to be different and have fields related to that particular tab. So you can see epitope was the one I was using as an example. So you can see, you know, we have the epitope ID section, and then all of it in one field is the IEDB IRI. And then you have the epitope section and all of its various fields. Antigen is a little special because it only pretty much shows what is displayed in the tab, but that may expand in the future as we work on other features with antigens, which I might be spoken with in another presentation, I'm not sure. Now the assays, all the assay types are going to be highly specialized to the B cell, T cell, or MHC assays, where they will all have their own sections. And as you can see, there's a lot of different sections, and all of these sections have tons of field options below them specific to that assay type. I'll run a demo here in a little bit, and I'll drill down so we can see some of the different options and get a grasp of just the breadth of the fields that you have access to, which previously you'd either have to take or leave because you didn't have access to deselect anything or select anything that you wanted in particular. You then have the receptor exports, which is going to be similar between TCRs and BCRs, and they have there's sections and all the different fields that you can say. And then finally, we have the reference one, which is a pretty simple export option, just has all these different fields and sections that you can see here. On top of the ability to select the fields, which was the main focus of all this, we also wanted to include your query parameters into the exports so you can get a grasp of what you queried for with that particular data set. So it directly ties your query parameters with that data so you can go back and reference it or utilize it. It's especially useful if you run multiple queries with multiple different options, so you can compare and contrast your different results within the IEDB in your exporting. We also have the date in there, which again, that's really useful if you want to compare results from, say 3 months ago in the IEDB to now to see how much your query parameters data has changed or what's as the curators go through and curate new references, what's been added, what's new in there. You can compare the differences between those two and get a good idea. But then you now have the date, so you don't have to try to keep track of, okay, well, I exported this one 3 months ago and I exported this one yesterday. The other big one is we've had this field descriptions added into the Excel export explicitly as a new sheet to give a really good example, or really good examples and really good insight into what all the fields mean and the context of the IEDB, as well as provide a little bit more information about what all could be in those fields. So in case your export, for example, doesn't have any data for that, then you can see this is what we would expect would be in this field if it's available within the IEDB. Here is an example of the parameters sheet within the Excel. You can see that this example is just looking for this linear sequence, linear peptides, and then it includes only positive assays. And then you can also see that the export data is included in this sheet as well. All of your parameters that you see directly in the filter section of the query, the IEDB website will be included in this sheet, so you can compare and contrast easily what your filters were at the time. And again, the date is included here. This is also available in the JSON format. You saw it briefly in my first slide. So that, again, you can parse that out if you need to in an application that you have, or if you write a program that needs to read it, you can quickly compare and contrast again there that way. It is not included in the CSV because it cannot be easily included in that, because that's just pure data, which is one of the shortcomings of the previous version we had of the export. Here is an example of the help tab that I spoke about, that this is only in the Excel format because of how they do sheets. It's a separate sheet, and it follows the same example as the same format, as the export itself, where you have the section, which I saw this one's an older picture, but it would have epitope IERI, and then you have 3 examples here. 2 of them are pre-selected examples chosen by our team. And the third one is just an example of what that data could be, just to show what particular data could be there. These 2 are actual example rows from the database. This one not necessarily a particular record. It could be a mashup of everything, but it's to show an example of what could be in that field no matter what. Then after that, you have the description of the field, which is a short, brief little description of what that field means and how it relates to the data, which is written by our IEDB team here, and gives an idea of what to expect in that field or how it's utilized. And finally, we have this help topic link, which we have it's a link to an IEDB page that goes more into that description on how it's utilized, or how it's referenced in the IEDB itself. Okay, and I think that's my entire PowerPoint. So I was going to go through and run a quick example to show exactly how you would use the exports kind of in real time, or in how you're going to do it. So here we have epitope. If you wanted to do, you can see all these expand, and you can choose and pick and choose whatever you want. So say you didn't want any related object information, you can get rid of that. If you just want, very basic information, you can do something like, like this. And then you can choose your format, your rows and everything. You hit the export button. It would take you to the, oh, this one exported almost instantly, but it takes you to this page, which is our standard file download page, which this page, depending on how complex and how much data is in your export, this could take a while, and this page can be bookmarked and come back here 24 hours, up to 24 hours after completion. I think I'm about out of time, aren't I, Nina? Okay, so I'll let you guys go, and we can answer some questions. But I will say that all the full exports are also available on the database export page here. So
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Kelly. Thank you for that. Hopefully, I know looking at the registrations for this year, there was about 20 to 25% of the attendees that registered that attended previous workshops. And perhaps you did see Kelly's presentation over the last couple of years where it was a work in progress and we were still working out the kinks and the tech. And now it's very much live and in use and really popular. So we've already received some positive feedback, but we'd love you to test it out. And again, you can always email us at help@iedb.org if you have any questions or comments. But with that, I'll give Kelly a minute or two to review the questions. But now I will invite Randi and Sidne back to kick us off for our section 2 Q&A. So Sidne, I think you will take the first question.
Right. So the first question is from Lana Kelly. So she's asking if for T-cell assay data, sometimes there appears to be duplicate results for the same linear sequence or assay, et cetera. What is the difference in the duplicate entries? So we as curators curate all the data or assays associated with an epitope in a single reference. So you can imagine that the same epitope can be studied the same way by two different groups. And so that would be one source of the duplication because we will curate those assays exactly the same. Another way that that could happen is through cross-reactivities. So if there are BCRs or TCRs that will react to the same epitope, but they are generated by two different in vivo processes, then those will also be captured separately. So there are often going to be subtle differences within the duplicate assays. I hope that answers your question.
Okay, and I was going to share screen to answer the question from Lana Kelly about querying for data that where you only see results where the MHC is defined. So T-cell assays where you know the MHC. So there's a couple different ways depending on how known the MHC is. So one is if you are only looking for data for a specific MHC, then you can use the MHC restriction box and type in that specific MHC. But if you want a whole group of MHC, you want all, say, all human class 1, then you can do that this way by picking human class 1, and you'll only get T-cell data. If we take these off, you'll only get T-cell data where human class 1 is known. But as I showed, when you get to the results page, if you're in the T-cell filter options and you go to the MHC restriction search box, you can then change the resolution. So if you only want to see data where you know at least one of the chains in detail, or you know both of the chains in detail, you can do that by using this resolution dropdown. And I'm going to take off that I had picked human. It hasn't loaded yet, sorry. If you take off the human, because if that's not what you're interested in, you're interested in known, then that MHC resolution of 2 chains will only give you results where it's very well known, regardless of which MHC you're talking about. So here, these T-cell assays will all have, it's blocking on my screen. Hey, wait a minute. My
You need to hit search.
yeah, no, I want to I've got Windows blocking me. The MHC restriction here, this is all human class 1, so it's known to some level, but maybe that's not precise enough. So here I've changed the search to just be only T-cell results where you know both chains, and so you'll get a different set of T-cell data here. hopefully that answers the question. We'll see now how this has changed. And you may also only want human, so you could have put in human class 1, and you can combine the resolution of 2 chains with any particular species, so you can further clarify it. I hope that answers the question. Sidney, or Kelly, do you have another question that you want to answer?
I think most of the questions are your wheelhouse, Randy.
Okay. I'm going to keep going, and Sidney, let me know if you want to answer something. So one of the questions was, what's the difference? This is Bandada asked, the difference between T-cell and MHC ligand assays. I'm going to open the assay finder while I answer this question. So in the T-cell assays, there must be an antigen presenting cell and a T-cell or a TCR recognizing the epitope in the context of the antigen presenting cell or that MHC. So like a tetramer assay, there's a T-cell and an MHC. The MHC assays include MHC binding assays where there's just an MHC molecule binding to an epitope. There's no TCR or T-cell in that assay at all. Or MHC ligand elution assays where you have an antigen presenting cell that processed something and presented that epitope in the MHC molecule, and then it was eluted out of it. Anyone else? I don't want to keep.
I'll take this one. Lana followed it back up. And you cannot currently save a query, so to speak, in the IEDB, but that feature is being looked at, and it's one that everybody requests, the ability to save your query and come back and rerun it at a later date. So it is definitely on our radar and being worked on. So I just wanted to clarify that a little bit. You want to take the next one?
Okay. I was going to talk about the documentation. I'm going to share again. So documentation means a lot of different things to different people. So we have different types of documentation. So it was, can you share a link to the documentation for the database? And that was from Shola Kaduna. There's different types of documentation, and I'm not totally sure what you want. So in the export header from the top, we have links to the schema if you want that type of documentation. We also have on the home page links to the learn more. It takes you to a page that gives you all sorts of information about our data fields, our publications, how to cite the IEDB, that type of documentation in terms of use, and the ontology. I don't know if that answers, or if Kelly, if you have anything to add about other types of documentation that might be in the release notes.
Not really in the release notes, but as you said, documentation is scattered all over the website. In particular, anywhere that you see a little question bubble,
yeah,
will show you. Yeah, so there's usually a learn more link there, which gives you more documentation about that particular section.
Yeah, each of the question marks. And we try, when we add something new to the database, we try to add a whole new section on the help desk, telling you more details about each of the things. So hopefully that answers it. Let's see what else we have.
Maybe while you're looking at the remaining questions, I'll briefly share screen just to touch on the documentation piece again. 1 second. So this is, as Randy just showed, the homepage. The somewhat more consolidated aspect, if you go to help and support, it will open the IEDB Solution Center, and this is where we have all of our help articles. So if you just go to general, We have some more general articles, some new and noteworthy aspects. So new features that we've launched. So as you can see, the most recent one is our IEDB 3D viewers, which is our 2.0. You'll learn more about that on day 3. And also the query API. So this leads me to Hor Al-Hassani's question. Will there be a talk to show other ways to export the data, i.e. programmatically? And there will be. So the reason why I segued here is because we do have an article. In the last 2 years, we launched the Immune Epitope Database Query API, also known as the IQ API. And this enables you to programmatically query the database and extract the data through query. So APIs will always have been around for the tools for a number of years, but the IQ API only came about in the last couple of years. So for anyone interested, Hor and anyone else, for that will be a presentation on day 3 by Dr. Jason Greenbaum, and it is titled IEDB Query API, IQ API. So pretty standard there. So that will be at 8:30 on Friday, Pacific time. And again, just while we're on the Solution Center there, we've got some frequently asked questions, some tutorials. You'll see links to last year's workshop as well. So there is quite a lot here. And as some of you may know, the IEDB has been around for 20 years almost, coming up in December. So there's a wealth of resources here and on our YouTube channel. And we do have an effort to update all of our help resources onto a new platform called Discourse. So you'll be hearing more about that, in coming months and a year and things like that. But for now, you can access the help here. So I'll hand it back to the team now. We've got a couple of extra minutes left of the Q&A.
Okay, I'll try and answer some questions. But let me do a share screen. Okay, one of the questions was about lateral flow assays. So that specific assay type is not currently in our finder. We have to have encountered a very specific assay type showing up many times before we add it, but we do have higher level search capabilities. So where that would show up would be under qualitative binding. It may show up as an ELISA or one of the other assay types, but if you search on the higher level qualitative binding or binding in general, you would get that data back. But that precise assay type hasn't appeared in enough papers exclusively to be added. We add them as we get more and more data, and it's something we do regularly is we review the more general assay types to see if there's a recurring theme of a particular assay type showing up, and then we would add it as its own node. But that's the benefit of the tree, is that if you go to a higher node, you'll always be able to find more detailed assays under that. And then I saw another one I wanted to answer. So sorry, I forgot to mention you said that. One of the questions also from Lana Kelly was about the tetramer core facility. They often determine, IEDB often has data for MHC restriction of several peptides. And how do you query from multiple peptides at one time? And the peptides may not have the same restriction. So like my query for influenza, that returned all influenza peptides. If you have multiple peptide sequences precisely that you want to query, you have to do them separately. Or Nina, I believe that might be something that's covered with the API query. So when you do your query, if you enter one peptide or you enter a particular protein of interest, if you don't check anything in the MHC restriction box, except for adding that some information was known using that resolution drop down, then you'll get all of the data for all restrictions. So it's true that one peptide may have many different restrictions.
I can add there that you could use the API to search for multiple sequences as a substring or a exact match. The API does not support blast searches, but it does support multiple linear sequences.
And I see.
And sorry, go aad.
No, yeah, you go ahead.
Okay, I will say that is the ability to put in multiple sequences is, again, on our radar. It's been requested multiple times, and it is in the process of development. It just hasn't been to a point of being able to be released or integrated yet.
Yeah, and Lana followed up with putting in the three different peptide sequences, and yeah, you would be able to search for all three in the API. And so when that talk happens, it'll be shown how to do that, and the image restriction will be returned if we know it for those peptides. Nina, do you want to go?
Yes, and we're at 10:20, so I'll give us another minute or so to wrap up. But one of the questions that was asked from Shola was, is there a community for IEDB users? If so, please share a link. And this is actually a great question in terms of a single community where we all connect online. I guess the short answer is no, but the long answer is many ways. So one of the ways is through Twitter or X. And at IEDB_, feel free to follow along there. And we will be sharing all of the final workshop materials on Twitter as well as in the post-event email. So, I mean, that's one platform. The other platform is YouTube. So we do have a YouTube page where we've shared every year that we've held a workshop, we've shared the materials on there. All these about 12 hours that we have of content each year, we break it up into chunks and upload them into little videos onto YouTube. So that is another form of community. But I think really what we're getting to is there a platform where we can all chat and connect? And that's something we're working towards. So as I showed earlier, we do have our help desk, our solution center, where we have a lot of articles. And then the other way users connect with us for help is via email. So help@IEDB.org, and that's really a one-on-one communication. So what we're trying to get to is community-based communication where users can help answer each other's questions in more of a forum situation. So that's briefly what I touched on, and maybe next year we'll have more details for you. But Discourse is a platform that many organizations use, in the world, and it enables this kind of forum-based communication where you can post a question and others can answer, as well as help articles and things like that. So thank you for asking that. It definitely gives us the push to keep developing that and transitioning, because obviously we have 20 years of materials to update and transition. But that would be the community that we will aspire to in the next little while. So thanks for that question, Shola. And then Randi, one last one for you.
Yeah, I'm going to do the last one. I'm not sure I'm going to do it justice. So anonymous attendee asked if we can evaluate the affinity between HLA-DQB1 haplotypes and hepatitis B epitopes, and then the except HLA-DQA. I'm not totally sure, but I'm going to start with the easy part. Is hepatitis B, wanted it to come up, epitopes, and then the level of the restriction of DQB1 is something that you can use the tree to get at. So you can see all the different ones we have, and I'm going to highlight. If you click this little highlight text button, it pops open the tree to the level of where you're looking. And so here's DQ, and these are all the DQA, and you're interested specifically in DQB. So here's DQB1. So these are, if we have data for that MHC, it will show up in the tree. If we have no data, it won't. So you can select all the DQB1 MHC molecules for which we have data. Turns out it's a lot. I'm going to stop there for example purposes. But then when you do the search, you're now searching for hepatitis B and and MHC restriction. And when you export the data, you'll see in the MHC column of those T-cell assays, the MHC that was tested in that experiment. And if you want to exclude any, you can do it there. If this if it's by searching for the DQB, you pulled in DQA information that you didn't want, you'll have to exclude that in your export. But I'm not positive how to search. I don't know if Bjorn's listening, if there's a way to exclude knowledge of the DQA, because we capture whatever the authors provided. Sometimes they don't tell us the one of the two chains. They may tell us only the A or the B chain, but that doesn't mean there wasn't an A or B chain present at the time of the experiment. So we're just showing you what was tested. I think that's all for me.
Excellent. Thank
I
you.
did listen in, and Randy, yeah, perfect. That's all it is. Yes.
Perfect. Thanks so much for jumping in. A big thank you to Randi, Sidne, and Kelly for those wonderful presentations. And now we will have a short break. So it's about 10 minutes rather than the 15, but it was very important to get through all those questions. So thank you all again to our attendees for submitting some real thought-provoking questions. So it's much appreciated. So we will check back in 10 minutes, 10:35 a.m. Pacific time. Feel free to stretch your legs, do all that. In the chat, I have put the return time in, a link to some additional resources if you want to browse some papers and whatnot, a reminder for our Twitter, a link to our YouTube, and a video for curation, and then the feedback survey. I will also play some videos during our break as well. It may come across a little fuzzy on your screen just due to how many people are online, but these are on YouTube anyway, so we just want to break up the quietness during the break. But otherwise, thank you all so much. See you in 10 minutes.